happens when you take a teeny tiny block of land in the inner city and put it in the hands of a creative plant lover. Come and I'll show you. How good is this? From laneway to jungle, just like that. I'll be showing you around this pocket oasis a little later on, but first, let's see what else is on this week's show.
Today, I'll tell you about the thriller, the filler and the spiller.
I'm planting up one of my newer garden beds to fill in the gaps and add some more colour.
My studio is actually my garden. It's actually like being in a natural wonderland.
The town of Margaret River is a popular tourist destination and a great place to set up home. This awesome 4-year-old property, with its productive gardens and stunning sustainable house, is the result of a dynamic duo. G'day, guys. Michael is an architect who designed the house, and Britta, a landscape designer who took care of the outdoors. Oh, check this out. It's cosy.
Yeah, it's always warm in here.
Wow, this is really, really lovely in the view. So I've got to ask, where did the project start? With the house or the landscape design?
We brought it up hand in hand, so the building and the garden. We knew the garden was going to be a more than integral part of the whole process. So rather than having one take preference over the other, we thought, well, we've got to bring them up together.
We also wanted to be living in a house that is part of the outside. So there's a lot of glass that incorporates the garden, brings it in. It's an open space quite deliberately, because with a footprint this small, we didn't want dingy little rooms. We wanted views through and out into the garden everywhere. So we feel like we are sheltered, but in the garden.
While Michael goes upstairs to work, Britta and I get into the garden. Wow, what a beautiful outlook.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah.
So describe how it was when you first came here.
Well, essentially the soil was like this. It was like road-based, you know. It was just gravel and clay and had absolutely no topsoil.
Yep.
So it was quite hard and compacted. It's an old horse paddock. We put on in a little bit of an agricultural approach. We had it deep ripped first. We collected the rocks off it. Then we had it limed. We had it seeded with green manure. Okay. We had the green manure ploughed back in. And then it started becoming fertile. But yeah, it took a little bit of time.
And talk us through this banking you've done here.
We decided to make a little bank to, well, help with the slope, really, because it was like the energy was basically sort of running down the hill and into the river valley.
Water and nutrients
and
as well.
Water and nutrients and everything was just escaping that way. Plus it gives you a real nice feeling of being embraced.
It does. Now densely planted with a mix of bird-attracting natives, including Grevillea, Adenanthus and Eremophila species, it also helps to draw wildlife through the property. At the lower part of the garden is an orchard and extensive poultry run. Moving back up towards the house on the southern section are more intensive plantings.
Well, this is the berry patch.
And what kind of berries are you growing?
Raspberries mainly, because they're my favourites.
Oh, very nice.
I've got 3 rows of them, which supply us the whole year with
Do they?
raspberries.
Right.
And then the front row are mixed brambles, so
Okay.
boysenberries and marionberries and loganberries and so
Oh,
on.
delicious.
Yes.
Careful water management here is clearly important. In addition to the capturing of storm water, rainwater is collected in tanks and wastewater is treated and reused for irrigation. Continual improvement of soil is also key.
The trick is organic matter and more organic matter. I don't like to spend all my time in the veggie garden, so I keep things really, really easy, and I compost on the spot. What I do is every day when I get my kitchen scraps, I bring them out here. This is not a lot today, but what we'll do is we'll just put them in on top of things. You can see this beautiful soil that develops underneath here. It's really humus rich. Tip it on, and you put a little bit of sheep manure over the top, and then some chip mulch. And that's all I do.
You don't find you get slater problems building
Well,
up?
the slaters actually love that stuff. That's what they're meant to do.
Yeah.
They break down decaying matter. So if I feed the soil enough like this, then the slaters don't touch the seedlings.
What an interesting technique.
Very simple, very practical. See, what else I do here to keep the soil really healthy and rich is I use a lot of materials from the area. In here's the magic potion.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Yes, hold your breath. This is
Okay.
going to be stinky.
Thanks for the warning.
Have a look. Beautiful herring frames.
Look at that.
My friend Rachel is a good fisherwoman and she catches herring and we eat the fillets and the rest goes in here and slowly decomposes and makes a really rich fertiliser.
It's a rich brew.
It is. And
Yeah.
it goes mainly on the fruit trees, but
Okay.
it's a lovely
Yeah.
local resource.
Full of nitrogen.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, it will be worth it.
Yes. Okay, guys. A few samples of fruit from the garden. We've got
Wow,
some,
goodness me.
yeah, taste if you like.
Lovely. Beautiful. To me, this really is just a great example of clever building, very clever gardening, and a great showcase of just how wonderful a sustainable lifestyle can be.
Thanks,
Thank
Josh.
you.
Yes.
Yes.
Any words of wisdom for others wanting to do something similar?
Look, living this idea the best you can, as in integrating nature and house and working and, keeping up the enthusiasm and enjoying it. Enjoying it, I think, is the key.
When you mention the idea of growing plants in pots to create a feature, most people think about the traditional plants like pansies, impatiens, petunias, things that give us that typical colour in the summer in our gardens. But really, if you want really good effect over the long term, you can't go past some of the Australian perennial plants. There are lots of themes you can follow when it comes to putting plants together. You could choose plants you put together for foliage colour, because they attract butterflies, for flower colour. But the really important thing is that whatever group of plants you put together must share the same ecology. In other words, they must have the same demands for sun, for soil, for water and for temperature, because they're all going to be growing in the same conditions. So they must thrive in those conditions. So here I've got a little group of plants that I've been around and chosen that I think will make a really stunning pot. And I've chosen them based on foliage colour. And quite obviously, the foliage colour here is the colour grey. Just look at them. They are quite different in their shape, and yet they're going to look fantastic together. Here I've got a little chrysocephalum, which has a paddle-shaped leaf and just that little bit of grey on the underside that looks really quite beautiful. Here, I've got a conostylus, long linear leaves that are so elegant. I really love the way in which the flowers stand up above the foliage, and yet these elegant leaves carry your eye right up the plant. And just look at the contrast between those. And then here, a grafted pimelia. It brings in a much coarser leaf, but it's got that grey colour, so that the three of these plants together, they'll all enjoy sun. They'll all enjoy a reasonably well-drained location. They'll all take good summer temperatures, but more than that, they're combined because they have a similar appearance. The first important thing to do, of course, is to choose a pot that is large enough for your purpose. The other thing I've done is I've chosen a black pot because I think it's just the perfect foil for the foliage that I want to use. Now, when it comes to choosing plants to put in a pot like this, I reckon there's a simple thing to remember. What you need is to have one plant which is your thriller. And in this case, it's this pimelia with these marvellous flowers. They really are very dramatic, and it forms a real hero plant in my display. I've not planted it symmetrically in the centre, but I've pulled it to the back of my pot, the intention being that you'll view it from the front, and I'm going to put the smaller plants around it. And the next plant I'm going to use are the conostylus. And if this is the thriller, then these are the fillers. And the fillers, of course, sit in the front here. They're going to contrast with the foliage of my pimelia. I think they're going to look really quite dramatic, in part because they're going to hide the legs of the pimelia. And then, if I've got my thriller and I've got my filler, the third thing I've got is this beautiful chrysocephalum, which is going to be my spiller. It's going to hang over the front of the pot, softening its edge, breaking it down, making it look really, really pretty. One of the great things about this combination is that grey foliage plants really enjoy sun. And so by putting these together, I can place these in a lovely sunny spot on the terrace. They won't need too much water, but I know that they'll thrive in the sun that they'll receive all through the day. These native plants make great potting specimens. Something like this will be a real pleasure in your garden.
I'm pretty excited about where I'm headed. A horticultural gem in the heart of Redfern. While it's all inner city hustle and bustle out on the streets, in here it's a tranquil plant paradise. This is Ian McMore, the homeowner and creator of this pocket-sized paradise. A landscape designer by trade and a man whose design style is fueled by his love of plants.
So Costa, this is where it all began. Originally this was a patch of lawn riddled with onion weed.
Looking around here, it's only a small space.
Yeah, it's virtually like 3 metres across by 7 metres long.
Yet you've got so much packed in here.
Well, that was the original intent, to have a complete foil to the streetscape, which is so busy and noisy, and then just to walk in here and have a complete contrast and somewhere where you could lose yourself and have the noise diffused from outside.
This place here, how old is it?
It's part of a row of terraces called Fitzroy Terrace, and they were built in 1845. So they're probably some of the oldest houses in the Redfern area.
The garden faces east and is shaded by neighbouring trees and buildings. Ian's made use of this by using plants that thrive in the same conditions.
So I just packed it full of pretty much sculptural foliage, like the foliage of the heliconias and the monstera, the philodendrons.
Yeah, and you've mixed up the foliage colour too. I mean, you've got reds, you've got the yellows, you've got the whites.
Well, again, I've used the yellows and the light colours to lighten up this dark corner.
Stepping into Ian's backyard courtyard is like having a tropical home extension. The seamless transition from indoors to out feels like another room rather than a garden. Standing here, you suddenly feel like the garden envelops you. There's plants on every vertical and horizontal space. Like down here, you haven't been shy to pack in the planting. There's quite a few different species here.
Mm-hmm. It's quite a shaded corner, so I chose this variegated acmea to kind of uplight that little corner.
Over here, it just continues with this array of different species.
Well, these variegas, for example, they also have that lovely yellow variegation, which again sort of uplights this dark corner. Then we have another bromeliad on this wall, which is Nerogelia compacta, which is stoloniferous. So just from one plant, it'll branch out and over time scramble up a wall. In its natural habitat in Brazil, you see them scrambling over
rock faces.
The rock faces and cliffs and over trees.
So the question here, how long has this been on that wall?
The initial branch was probably like a metre tall, and within 5 years we pretty much had the plant scrambling almost to the top of the wall. And then you have all this draping pyrostedra above. I tend to be a bit of a bowerbird with plants, so I've gone through phases of collecting different things, and I've had to edit that collection over the years and sort of fit the pieces within this landscape.
I feel like a plant hunter exploring, moving through curtains of foliage, and now we've turned up in this beautiful little nook. And so this is actually your back gate.
It's pretty low tech the way we've made this. It's just mesh welded onto the metal gates and then pots pretty much hooked onto the mesh. And as you can see, over time it's virtually covered the whole face of the
It's
garden.
amazing. Now, Ian, I heard down the trumpet vine that your passion for gardening started with a little project in a cake tin.
That's going back a long time, yes. As a 9-year-old kid, I entered a competition in the local show, which was a miniature garden grown in a cake tin. And look, I'm still doing it. I can't help myself.
Ian's garden is full of great ideas for gardeners in small spaces. It's amazing just how much you can fit in. So this weekend, why don't you throw together some climbing plants, add a dash of experimentation, a little nip of creativity, and you'll be amazed by the results.
Mangroves are fascinating places and they have some really curious plants. If you look carefully, you can see what looks like swellings on the stems of the trees around me, but they're not a problem. In fact, it's an epiphyte, and it's a very specific one. Between the mangroves and the coastal forests, you'll see ant house plants growing. This is one of the weirdest relatives of coffee you could imagine. The flowers are really small, but the berries are important for birds. But it gets its name because it provides tunnels. The whole stem is honeycombed, and it invites local species of ants to come and live inside. Now, this is a symbiotic relationship. They both benefit because the ants defend their home from caterpillars that would eat the ant house plant's leaves, and the ant house plant also benefits from the droppings of the ants. They help to feed it. Now, these things are only found in rainforests in far northern Queensland, and I think every collector should grow one.
My name's Tracy Deep, and this is my studio in Redfern, Sydney, where I've been practicing my floral sculpture work, working with nature for the last couple of decades. You know how people say, oh, gotta work tomorrow? I'm one of those people that can't wait to get to work, because it's really not work. It's play. So my studio is actually my garden. It's actually like being in a natural wonderland. Growing up, I was one of those kids that were just always picking up the rock or the leaf or some bit of nature. I was just always intrigued by, the textures and the pattern. I found at school, I just was crazy about my art classes. You're supposed to be out at lunch, I'd be in there with the art teacher. So it wasn't till I started working in flower shops where I was delving deeper into nature. I was really attracted to things that would grow the way they were not supposed to grow. From that time, I was always intrigued by the more unusual elements. And then I got to a point where I just thought, I need to go and just spread my wings and explore this more for myself and delve more deeply into creating what I discovered to be floral sculptures. So I love using the wattle before it goes into full bloom, when it's still kind of delicate and almost neutral, subtle tones. Protea, they dry so beautifully. And then what I tend to do is actually take out its centre, and then you discover a whole other world in there. That's inspiring already. I've never been one to follow rules. So with the living art, the floral art, Mother Nature's been my teacher, and what an inspiring teacher she is. I can't draw, I have no idea how to put pencil to paper. For me, I tend to draw with my materials. It's a three-dimensional drawing. And then what actually amazes me always with every work of art, once it's put up, they throw incredible shadows and the shadow of the work becomes the drawing, the sketch that I could never create myself. So I tend to work, I suppose, backwards with what I do. I've been going to the flower markets now for a few decades. We get out there from 5 a.m. You race in there and just grab whatever catches your eye.
Oh, the beautiful sticks. Oh, I love these. Of course, I need a particular one.
And you get that put aside, and then you just keep going from grower to grower.
This is just as chaotic as my studio. Maybe that other beautiful, yeah, look at that. Spectacular.
It's at the point now where they'll just have something sitting aside going, oh, Trace is going to love this because it's dead, or or no one else is going to see the beauty in it.
Actually, I'd love to get that big sweeping branch as well. That's stunning. That's made my morning. Wow, thank you so much. I'm so happy standing under a tree.
I'm just going to have a play with all these beautiful ingredients that I sourced this morning, like this beautiful eucalyptus. Some of it is in flower and some of it is in bud. I love this Gaimea lily because it's transitioned from being a fresh bloom to almost drying out, and I've found the textural element intensifies. I'm using this beautiful branch and it's creating height for the work, and it's quite beautiful when you look through the work and through the branches. I think garden lovers would really appreciate and understand my journey and what I'm actually creating, because to be a gardener you have to appreciate the beginning to the end of the life of a flower, and that's a big part of the inspiration in my work. From seed to bloom, but then to the afterlife.
Where there's a gap, there's always room for another plant. And anyway, who doesn't love an excuse to get more of their favourite things into their garden? This is a newer area of my garden. It bakes in summer, and yet in winter it gets hammered by frost. I've had some successes, but some plants aren't looking so good. So I'm keen to fill in the gaps with some varieties that have performed well and others that I think will do well, so that I have colour and interest all year round. First up, space your pots out on the bed and step back and take a look. That way, you'll get the best arrangement before you take them out and plant them. Now, there are so many salvias and they're so diverse, a great range of colours. Some need wet feed, but others love hot, dry conditions, perfect for my garden. This one's an old-fashioned form called a clary sage. It comes from northern Africa or the Mediterranean, and it produces beautiful pink, blue and white flowers, which are quite specky. However, its foliage is really why I want to grow it. It has large, silver grey, hairy foliage that makes a real statement. Now, as a perennial, it's not that long-lived. However, when it finally dies, it should self-seed, so I'll get more to spread around the garden. Now for another salvia. This is a Salvia lanceolata. It comes from the Cape of Good Hope region of South Africa, so perfectly suited to my Mediterranean-like climate. It has interesting dull pinky brown flowers and actually forms more of a shrub, about 1 metre by 1 metre. Not a heap of flowers on it at any one time, but it flowers over a really long period. And over there I've got another salvia, one called Greek Skies. It has fabulous silver grey foliage, gets to about 60 centimetres high and has beautiful blue flowers. Now, as a general rule, plants with silver foliage love the heat and they do really well under my tough conditions and even tolerate salty water. Because we've had a lot of rain recently, some parts of the garden bed are really a little bit wet to be planting into. However, I don't have the luxury of time, so I'm doing it anyway. At the front of the bed, I'm going to plant some more Arctotis. This is an old-fashioned hardy ground cover from South Africa that would spread indefinitely, but the new hybrid forms are really compact and only get to about 1 metre across. These were planted about 6 months ago and they've done really well. They come in a range of colours. There's orange, red, yellow, white, pale pink. And this particular one's a dark plummy colour and I love it. So I'm going to continue the informal border. Now, one of the things about Arctotis is their flowers only open when it's sunny. So on an overcast day, they don't look quite as cheery. However, if you can be bothered deadheading the spent flowers, you'll even get more flowers out of them. Now, the last thing I'm going to plant is a dwarf form of lamb's ear. It's called Stachys thurkii. I like it because it doesn't get as daggy as the normal one. It remains nice and dense in the ground, and when the flower spikes form, they get up to about 30 centimetres high. Now, it makes a great border, nice and dense, and you only need to divide it every few years. I've actually been lucky enough to be given these bits from a friend who's got a border, and I'm going to simply create my own border around here to edge the fire pit area. So if I break some bits off like that and space them about 30 centimetres apart, I think within a year or so I'll have a lovely border. Well, that's that job done. I think any gap is an opportunity. So why not get out in your backyard and see what's possible this weekend?
I've really enjoyed my visit to Ian's garden and I feel like I'm leaving with so many great ideas. That's it for this week, but let's have a look at what's coming up on our next show.
Everything about this garden is big. I get to talk to the gardener who's converted a hectare of ground into a subtropical showpiece using great plant knowledge, good gardening nous and a liberal dose of hard work.
Julian Mitchell and his good mate Ryan Creed work their magic here to make a dent in the 18-odd tonnes of spent coffee produced in Fremantle each year. Their shared project is mushrooms.
Everyone loves a spud, and I'm going to give you the dirt on some great ways of growing your very own.